Hey there, and welcome back to The Empowered Edge, the podcast where we unlock your best self through optimal health, a resilient mindset, and lasting habits. I'm your host, Jenna Hostetler, and today we're tackling one of the biggest misconceptions in nutrition, the 80-20 rule. You've probably heard that if you eat well 80% of the time, you can be flexible the other 20% and still reach your goals. Which sounds nice and balanced, right? Well, not exactly, because if you've ever tried it, you know it's not that simple. In episode 10, we talked about defining what healthy actually means so that you can create goals that support your priorities instead of chasing after what someone else says you should be doing. And last week, in episode 15, we broke down what real commitment looks like and why being almost committed is exhausting and setting you up for failure. Well, today we are bringing those two conversations full circle by exposing why the 80-20 rule does not work and how you can build a sustainable, disciplined approach to health that gives you both freedom and flexibility without the mental chaos. It is so easy to get overwhelmed by diet rules that make healthy eating feel like an impossible standard. But here's the truth. Perfection is not the goal. Consistency is. And when you understand how commitment, discipline, and flexibility actually work together, staying on track with your health becomes a whole lot easier. So if you've ever struggled with the all or nothing mindset, if you've ever felt trapped by food rules, or if you've ever wondered why 80-20 leaves you feeling stuck, this episode is for you. Let's dive in. One of the biggest struggles I see people have when they try to eat healthier is they think they have to stick to the plan 100%, which would be fine if the plan had built-in flexibility, but they never do, which means by default you have to be perfect. You're either on plan or off plan. And since no one gives you a framework for how to successfully be off plan, the second you slip up, you feel like you failed. And maybe you've been there before. You commit to a plan, you eat healthy all week, and then Friday rolls around. You go out to eat, you order something off plan, and suddenly you feel like all of your progress is ruined. And instead of just moving on and getting right back on track, you think, well, I already messed up. I might as well just enjoy the weekend and start over on Monday, which we all know never happens. And here's the problem. If you can't go out and eat a burger with onion rings and stop right there, if something that small sets you totally off track, then you'll be battling with your eating habits for the rest of your life because you've never learned discipline. And what you're saying is that you can only be successful if life is perfect. We as humans love to go to extremes. We are all in or all out, and if we are all in, we do a massive overhaul. It's like if we're not doing this grandiose gesture, it's not good enough. And because we can't trust ourselves to have leeway, then the only option is to be perfect or to be totally off track. And this cycle is exactly what keeps people stuck. It's not the occasional off-plan meal that throws you off track. It's the mindset of believing you failed that does the damage. Because when you believe you failed, your actions follow. And the truth is, you don't need to be perfect. Perfection is not the goal. Consistency is. Would you rather strive for perfection and constantly fail, or focus on being better today than yesterday and allowing yourself to enjoy life along the way? Now you might be thinking, I've done this whole flexibility thing when I was on Weight Watchers and it did not work. And if that is you, I'm not surprised, because while Weight Watchers intended to build flexibility into their plans, they did it wrong. And if you want more details on that, listen to episode 3, Why 1,200 Calories is Not the Answer, and substitute the word points for calories. Now let's talk more about the 80-20 rule. This idea that if you eat healthy 80% of the time, you can indulge the other 20% and still get results. Now at first it sounds like a great method. You're not being too strict and you still get to enjoy treats without guilt. But in reality, the 80-20 rule causes way more problems than it solves, and here's why. Number one, it creates decision fatigue. When you're following the 80-20 rule, you are constantly making decisions. And as we discussed last week, constantly making decisions leaves room for doubt, negotiation, and excuses because you constantly have to figure out, is this meal going to be part of my 80% or my 20%? Did I already hit my 20% this week? Can I save up my 20% for the weekend? It allows for too much inconsistency, and it is a recipe for mental chaos. But wait, let's back up a minute, because before we can know if we've hit our 20%, we have to ask ourselves, 20% of what? If we're eating 3 meals a day, that means 4 meals a week can be off plan. 4 meals. That could look like lunch and dinner every single Friday and Saturday being off. Or 4 nights a week you get takeout. That's way too often of eating off, and you will never make progress that way. You just can't. But wait a second. Does 20% include everything we consume? Because then we have to factor in snacks and drinks too. And then you have to ask yourself, how far off plan am I allowed to go on my 20%? Can I throw caution to the wind and instead of eating paleo, I have pizza, cheesy bread, soda, and dessert? Is that okay? Or do I only eat a couple pieces of pizza and the rest of my meal is still paleo? Veggies, water, no dessert. How can you quantify what 20% off is? Is it 20% of calories? 20% of the meals you eat? Do 2 snacks equal 1 meal? Where does the milkshake fit in? Is it 20% straight from the norm? Does 10% a little bad and 5% really bad equal 20% away from the plan? Can you be a little off each day and average it out to 20% over the week? Or are we going by days? So every 7 days you can be off for a day and a half. No rules Saturday afternoon to Sunday night sounds pretty great. And are we averaging daily, weekly, monthly? If I'm perfect 2 weeks in a row, can I be twice as off the 3rd week? What about vacation? Can I be perfect before and after and abandon all standards while I'm gone? What about holidays? Can I roll over days? If I go over my limit on Sunday, can I make up for it by being extra good next week? Now you might think I'm being facetious or extreme here, and I am to make a point. I can also tell you that these thoughts go through people's minds, and this is how far they will stretch the limits to justify doing what they want, regardless of the commitments or the goals that they keep acting like they want. And I know because I've done it and I've seen people do it all the time. And let's be real, if you're making food choices on the fly, that 20% can easily become 30%, then 40%, and before you know it, you have no idea how far off track you are, and you're frustrated that your progress is not where you want it to be. And this is why commitment makes life so much easier, because instead of deciding every single meal if you should stay on track, you decide once and you follow through because you're not negotiating with yourself. You're just doing what you've already committed to. And that is the difference between commitment and trying. Commitment is clear. Trying is exhausting. The second problem is that with the 80-20 rule is that it creates a cheat meal mindset. Instead of learning how to eat in a way that's sustainable for life, people treat that 20% as a free-for-all. They think, I ate healthy all week, so now I can have whatever I want. And the term cheat meal or cheat day is a problem in itself because you're constantly telling your brain that the only way to have off-plan food is to cheat. You're either perfect or you're cheating. You're following the rules or you're cheating. It's the very definition of going to extremes, and we feel like we have to justify imperfection by proceeding an order of tacos and cheese fries with, oh, well, it's a cheat day, instead of designing your own standards and eating whatever you choose without explanation. And the idea of cheating leads to a cycle of restriction and overindulgence, binging on weekends, feeling guilty, then trying to make up for it during the week. You don't need to cheat on your diet. You need to create a diet that allows you to enjoy food while having enough flexibility that you can hit your goals. And that is the difference between commitment and trying. When you're committed, you define the terms in advance and you stick to it instead of winging it and hoping for the best. One of the biggest barriers to healthy eating is the fear of feeling deprived. People assume that giving up sugar, soda, or processed foods means a life of sacrifice, compromise, and missing out. I mean, there's nothing worse than going out with friends on a summer evening and everyone deciding that they want to get ice cream, and while they're all enjoying their waffle cones and hot fudge and cold creamy goodness, you are sitting over there watching them like a weirdo, feeling left out, and silently cursing the person who invented the wonder that is ice cream, and all of your friends for eating whatever they want without a care in the world. And that's a scenario people envision when they start a new diet, and it's why they feel like they need the option to cheat. But here's the truth. The more you eat real, nourishing food, the less you even want the processed stuff. It's exactly what we talked about in episode 12. Now I can perfectly describe that ice cream scenario because ice cream used to be my thing. Like for nearly a year, I would eat it almost every day. And even outside of that season, it was a fairly regular part of my diet. But when I was figuring out what was going on with my gut and I was either off dairy, off sugar, or off both, I genuinely did not know how I could not have ice cream. But when I cut out dairy for a while, as hard as it was, I realized I didn't miss it anymore. And now I can say no to ice cream easily. Not because I forced myself to, but because my body no longer wants it all the time. And I can say no easily because I'm in control of what I eat. And I can say yes easily without guilt or regret because I know my limits. And the funny thing is, when I went so long without eating ice cream, my taste buds totally reset. And that cheap stuff became so nasty, I would happily not eat it. So now, not only do I have control around what I'm eating, I've raised my standards because I only want the real stuff. Give me milk, cream, vanilla, and sugar. No low-fat junk, no low-calorie crap, no artificially flavored and colored frozen goo that looks like it was made in a Crayola factory. Just give me real ice cream, or I'm good. And people think that freedom is being able to eat whatever they want, whenever they want. But real freedom comes from being able to say no to things that don't serve your goals. Discipline in your food choices creates freedom in your life. The more disciplined you are about your health, the more you are free to enjoy the benefits of feeling great, being healthy, and having the energy to pursue your passions. Saying no to things that don't support your goals is not restricting. It is freeing you to live fully without being controlled by cravings. Like, think about an alcoholic. True freedom is not needing to avoid bars because the temptation is too strong. True freedom is being around alcohol and not even wanting it. That is the kind of food freedom we should be aiming for. When we become disciplined, we gain something far better than the ability to eat whatever you want whenever you want. We gain the freedom from cravings, and we gain control. And that's the real shift. Saying no isn't deprivation. Saying no is power. Because when you say no to things that don't serve you, you're saying yes to things that you really want. Your health, your energy, and the life that you actually want to be living. So if the 80-20 rule does not work, what does? Well, here's how you can create a way of eating that supports your goals without falling into the trap of perfection or burnout. Number 1, you commit 100%, but you define your own standards. Being 100% committed does not mean being perfect. It means being clear on what your standards are, what's ideal when life allows you to be perfect, and what's acceptable when flexibility is required, and what is not acceptable ever. Then create a plan to make the ideal scenario as easy as possible so that it becomes the norm. The key is to set your boundaries in advance, not the moment when emotions and cravings cloud your judgment. Number 2 is focusing on the plan, not the numbers. Instead of tracking whether you've earned the right to go off plan, focus on staying committed as much as possible, knowing that you can get off track periodically without it ruining your progress. And when you want dessert or a cinnamon roll or whatever your thing is, you have it on your terms, not because you hit some arbitrary 80% threshold. And finally, number 3, making decisions once, not over and over again. Remember, deciding in advance reduces decision fatigue. When you already know what you're doing, you don't waste time and energy debating food choices all day long. Instead of deciding, should I eat healthy today? You just decide once that healthy eating is your default. Instead of wondering if you should have the dessert, decide ahead of time what your standards are and if it's worth it. The less time you spend negotiating with yourself, the more mental energy you have to put towards actually living your life. So here's your challenge for the week. Let go of the all or nothing mindset and define your standards. What does 100% commitment look like for you? Not perfection, just clear guidelines. Write it down, make the decision once, then stick to it without negotiating. Because when you stop relying on the 80-20 rule and start making real decisions, eating healthy stops feeling like a battle and it starts feeling like freedom. Remember, perfection is not the goal, and neither is striving for a diet that sounds impressive but only works temporarily. Healthy eating is about consistency and staying true to your long-term goals. Give yourself grace when things don't go as planned, and focus on progress over perfection. If you found this episode helpful, share it with someone who's stuck in that 80-20 trap and needs a new perspective. If you haven't already, go back and listen to episode 10 on defining your own version of health and episode 15 on the power of commitment. Because when you put all these together, everything in your life gets easier. Take action, stay empowered, and I'll see you next time.